welcome everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, Paul. Our guest today, Lata Hamilton, is an inspiring change leadership and confidence expert and the creator of the leading successful change program, largely for businesses in Australia, although she serves several international clients as well. In conversation with Lata, I came to realize that changes in business can only occur when individual people in the company change first. Change, therefore, is as much personal as it is corporate. As a millennial, Lata embraces corporate as well as personal change from a grand perspective, and today's show is sort of a potpourri of new and fresh ideas, all of which demand and require change. I can't wait for our chat on some really interesting and important topics. With that, let's bring on our special guest coming to us from Australia, Lata Hamilton. Welcome back to the next chapter with Charlie.
Hi, Charlie. Thanks so much for having me. It's really great to be back here.
Yes. I didn't mention that you had been on the show. Well, I'll mention it. I'm going to mention it in my next statement, but you have been on the show before. And as we did the new format and the new direction of the show, you were there were under 20 people out of 300 that we sent invitations saying we would love to have you back because you were such a fun guest to begin with. And you were on that list, and I'm so glad you agreed to come back.
Thank you so much. That's such an honor.
Thank you. We talked, it wasn't that late. This kind of surprised me. I thought we talked further back, but we talked in July of 2023. And we had a conversation about the need for the discipline of change management in corporations of all sizes. At that time, we agreed about the value of managing change. And yet, in just 9 months, it's only been 9 months since we talked, it seems the need for dealing with change has exploded. And in this ever-changing world economy and in the world of work, the change is happening more rapidly than ever. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. I mean, obviously, COVID kind of started that trend, and now that sort of COVID settled down, we're seeing so much change on the horizon. Often being driven by technology, often being driven by digital, and then also economic constraints as well across the world. Yes.
When economic constraints, is that resource driven? Is that mission driven? Is that need oriented? What do you think is driving this need for change in organizations, or is that too broad a question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a resetting sort of more holistically of sort of business. We went through a period of turbulence and turmoil, and now it's just that natural, the decisions that people have around what do they want the future to actually look like. And so I think there's sort of two things that are really happening. The first thing is that things are settling, at least in Australia, and I've been in contact, I've got students and clients from all over the world, and so I'm hearing the same things sort of in the US and in the UK and in Europe and things like that, where cost of living is increasing. In Australia, the interest rates have increased, and so that has that flow-on effect with what's happening in our workplaces and in our organizations. It changes the mindset and the culture of people. It shifts people's job security, and there were a lot of layoffs during COVID, but we're seeing more of that happening now, more operating model changes, more restructures, and it's just that resetting of things. It's like a decision around what we're going to do, and the world is always in flux, and so we're just in a period of flux right now in terms of increased cost of living, increased interest rates, a bit less sort of capital out there in the market, or people's own ability to spend. So that's one thing. And then I think from a broader perspective, there is this real shift. We've been operating from what my intuitive business coach, I've got an intuitive business coach here in Australia, and her name's Jacqueline Atkins, and she talks about the patriarchal model of business, which has really been the last, 2,000 plus years, has been very patriarchal, very driven from that sort of a male orientation, very much about sort of growth and improvement and making more money and making things bigger and making things better, and doing that at the expense of the planet, doing that at the expense of people, doing that at the expense sometimes of leaders' own self-interest. And we're starting to see that start to shift. So we're starting to see this sort of new earth come up, and then that's having a flow-on effect in the world of business as well, where, I'm seeing baby boomers and I'm seeing Gen X leaders who are looking at people like me, millennials and Gen Z and, other younger generations, and looking at the kind of life and lifestyle that we have and going, I want that too. So I had a conversation with somebody who was a senior leader, and he had seen the way that I had started my business. And, there was a sense of admiration and also a bit of not envy, but he was like, oh, I never thought that was possible for me. But because I'm an example of going out and carving your own path and doing things in a different way and showing up in a really different way in business and bringing that really heart-centered, people-focused approach where you don't burn everything around you for success. You don't burn the planet for success. Instead, it's a much more feminine, balanced, holistic approach where you go, how do we increase the size of the pie for everybody? How do we create a future that is successful and sustainable and happy for everybody? And so we're starting to see some of these older generations realize that, maybe they did things in a particular way and got to a certain level of success. But at the end of the day, are they happy that they, might have never been around for their family, that their marriages are broken down, that their health is on the rocks? And do they want to actually continue being that way in the future? So I think there's this real shift in businesses and workplaces across these two angles at the moment.
That's very encouraging. I really was unaware of it's probably your late baby boomers and not your people my age, but your people in their 60s and that are becoming more aware and saying, we're living longer, I have more life to live, what am I going to do with it? And do I just want to make money, use people, not optimize, but overuse resources until we have none left? And rethinking that. That's really encouraging to know that baby boomers are thinking that way. I know that the millennials and Gen Zs are thinking that way, but it's very encouraging to know that there are baby boomers thinking that way as well.
Yeah.
Did you have a chance? There's a book, as I was thinking about this topic, I was thinking, and I do want to get on to your intuitive leadership coach or intuitive business coach. I'm not sure of the title. Intuitive business coach. I've got a whole segment I want to talk on that. So we're not going to just pass that by. But I'm thinking today that many companies are. I'm finding, and not from so much personal, because I deal in companies, charities that are people-oriented anyway. But many companies are beginning to value employee empowerment and buy into their mission, understanding it's no longer the command and control, here's what you're going to do. And I'll never forget the day when I heard the vice president of one of the top 5 oil companies, we're in business for stakeholder value, for shareholder value. And I just thought, God, that makes me want to wake up in the morning and go to work for you. That's, but now you're seeing much different and progressive companies and especially younger leaders, millennials and Gen Zs, are standing in the forefront. I'm wondering, did you get a chance to read Seth Godin's Song of Significance?
No, I've never read that book, but I'd be keen to kind of hear, what were the key takeouts that you had from that kind of resonated for you?
Well, I would love to tell you, but you know what? It's one of my favorite books of the last, favorite business books of the last 2 or 3 years, and I can't find it. among my books. I've looked all over, and I know this is what he's talking about. He writes about that it needs to be people, that our businesses need to be people-centric, and that we need to empower, engage, and listen to what the values and the missions and the goals of the individual, and that the individual understands and feels like they contributed to the value of society. They are not just making money. And he writes a whole book on that, the whole book is like a large print, 120-page book, which is wonderful. That's my kind of book. But it's become quite popular. And I'm wondering, along this topic, what kind of changes do you see as being most prominent in, or up and coming, not maybe most prominent, but up and coming in corporations that you serve today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in terms of what you were just talking about, that the importance of employee empowerment, employee buy-in, bringing people on the journey, that kind of really human-centered approach. I'm all about that. As an organizational change manager, that is my jam. It's about how do we actually bring people on the journey, and that could be our employees, that could be our customers, that could be our clients, our community, our government organizations. It's not just our internal people. But even just going back to something that you mentioned, Charlie, it's not for me, it's not either or, where it's yes, maybe in the past there was a big focus on profits and shareholder value and stakeholder value. In terms of for-profit companies, and then there was no focus on employees. It's not that now it's the only focus is on employees and there's no focus on profits. There is still a commercial imperative for for-profit companies to create financial value and returns. That is what they're all about. Those people who get that money then invest that back in, taxes. They invest that back into communities. They invest that back into their own personal quality of life and growth. So that it's not a problem to be making money as a company. It's also not a problem to be making money as an employee. Your work is there. It's not a hobby. You're not volunteering. You are meant to be being compensated. You are meant to be remunerated for the work that you do. So money is not the problem. It's just when money is seen as the only thing at the expense of people, at the expense of employees that are happy, healthy, fulfilled, thriving, at the expense of communities, at the expense of our world, that's when it becomes an issue. So it's about balancing the two, I think. It's about making sure we've got those results and also making sure that we're bringing people on the journey. And Gen Y and Gen Z are really much more about, let's open this up, let's collaborate, let's co-create, whereas exactly as you mentioned, it was much more of a command and control before. And it's still really a struggle I'm finding in organizations today, in corporations, in businesses that I work with, that there is still this desire for all decisions and all projects and all, anything new that's being created to be done at the leadership level or to be done by a project behind closed doors, because I often work in the project space, with no communication, conversation, co-creation, collaboration with the people across the business or across the organization who are actually the ones that are going to use the thing or be impacted by the thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know where this stemmed from, but I think that it's a feeling that it's I don't want to make any mistakes. I don't want to show anybody anything while it's in development. They can only see it when it's the final finished product. And the problem with that is that it's you're then teaching your people that you can't make mistakes and that you can't, get feedback on things that are still in development and still in progress. So you're creating this culture internally that it's everything has to be finished and polished. And these assumptions that are happening at senior levels or behind closed doors with projects, that what they know is best. But it could have been, say you had somebody who is a frontline worker. The senior leader in that organization, it might have been 30 years since they were a frontline worker. And there's so many layers and levels of leadership between that CEO and that frontline worker. And so it's how do we open it up? And I like to say it's about being through the line. So which is actually more of a marketing term, through the line advertising and campaigns. But like I use it in terms of organizations where you go leader-led and then you've got grassroots. So you get leader-led top down, grassroots bottom up, where you're starting to activate the employees at the bottom. You're starting to get them involved. You're starting to invite, whether it's small cohorts or opening it up. I've worked on changes that have opened up competitions and surveys and polls and things to the entire organization to give us ideas. And so, running hackathons and things like that. So you've got the grassroots bottom up, and the magic happens in the middle. So it happens where you meet in the middle, where you get the blend of those two things. And a really great way, that I do that with change management is through what I call the engagement formula of vision setting. And this is where, you absolutely have your senior leadership team. Maybe that's your C-suite or your board even. I've done it with boards before. So it could be your board, your C-suite, or your senior leaders, or your project team, who come up with this shining vision of the future and of what this change is going to mean from a people perspective and from a people experience, and then what that is going to mean from business results and business benefits, so the actual return on investment that we'll get. And then you cascade that down and you allow individuals within the teams that are impacted to start to set their own individual visions of what this change is going to mean for them.
Mm-hmm. How does it impact them personally and their team?
Yeah, and they decide it for themselves.
Yes.
So often in change, there's this idea of, the project deciding what's in it for me. But it's like, the project's perspective is often like, it's going to save us time. It's going to save us effort. When individuals hear saving time and effort, what do they usually think? Oh, I'm going to lose my job. So that's not actually motivating to an individual. So the vision has to be more about the people experience and has to use that, collective we language. And that's how you bring everybody together around that shining vision of the future from an organizational perspective. What's often missing in organizations is actually empowering individuals in the team to come up for themselves what this change is going to mean for them, how it could improve not just their time at work, but also their entire careers and life beyond that, because they are full, holistic human beings. Work is just one little part of their entire life. And so we're starting to create that almost like a sense of responsibility where people start to take their own ownership and their own responsibility for how they lead themselves through the change. It's not a parent-child relationship, which so much, like I was saying, like that patriarchal model of business, very, parent-child relationships, like we're the organization, we do everything for you, you have to follow our instructions. No. Let people start to decide what they need for themselves, especially because with the future of work, leaders just won't have the ideas, they won't have the ability to think fast enough and to understand fast enough what it's going to mean for their people. So we have to start getting more people involved and activated.
The
burden doesn't have to stand on the leader's shoulders.
What you're saying reminds me of a charity I've just started working with that I will probably be my swan song charity. I see me working with them for the next decade. But before we say that, I must agree with you that when we talk about empowering and buy-in and employee-centric, it still is, we're in business for one reason. We're in business to make money. We're not in business, this is not a social club. But it does not mean that we ignore, we can actually make more money when the individuals have buy-in and empowerment. They understand what's going on. They're the ones that deal with it. In the 1990s, this organization is still in existence. It's called Impact. And they believed in, we did training, and they believed in organizational training. This happened in the 90s, Lata. In the 90s, the leader believed that change happens in middle management. That's where it really begins. It doesn't begin, you think it begins at the top, or that it come up from the bottom, but it's middle management. And when middle management begins to demonstrate success, then it starts spreading throughout the company. But that was interesting. But I wanted to tell you about this company that I'm working with. It's they deal in underserved communities and what people think are higher, not high income, not wealthy counties or cities, but that are well-to-do cities, but they have neighborhoods that that are at risk or called hoods or whatever, and I'm writing their strategic plan. And to give you an idea, that the vision we have right now is these are people largely I would say there's a good many of them that have just come into the country, and but what we try to do is to build communities where underserved people have a chance, and that they get to start the race at the beginning. They get to start the 100-yard dash at the beginning of the race, not 10 yards behind. And this is, I've called them, when I've worked with the leadership, I've called them, Lata, I've called them, you guys are anarchists. You run this coordinated chaos. It's quantum physics at work. And so writing a strategic plan, I've called it an agile strategic plan, of where I don't want you to stop being so responsive, but at the same time, we need to have a bit more on metrics and roles and accountabilities that keep us going, but it is still, we are responsive. It's not, we have this strategic plan. This is not in accordance with what the executive director wants or what the COO wants. This is in accordance with what need we meet. And that has been such a fun thing to work with, and me calling them anarchists, that you are, you're not for just this one single rule of thought, that you have lots of methodologies and they're buying into it. And it's just fascinating. It is so inspiring for me to work with these wonderful individuals that are doing such incredible work in communities. But it is not unlike what you've been describing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I'm saying about, and that's what Jacqueline Atkins is often talking about, these newer businesses where it's like, it's a really different approach to how you do things. The outcome is still the same, right? Like there's still that focus on results and success, but the way that you do it is different, which increases success for everybody.
Yes. That's a great way to put it. It increases success, not only on the bottom line, but on the workforce, on the people that are producing the bottom line. It's increasing success for them, where they can feel like they're contributing to the organization, not just doing a task.
Yeah, and I think for people to have nowadays, people don't want to work the 60-hour, 80-hour week. That's not. It's not the way that they want to work. So we have to work smarter. We actually have to have people who can work in a more intelligent way, rather than trading time for money, that they're actually trading value for money, the value that they can bring into the organization. And if an organization wants top performers and top talent, they need to really be rethinking what their measures of success are, because gone are the days when we're willing to burn ourselves out, put our health, put our relationships, put our life on the line for work. It's just not like that anymore. We're just not willing to do it. Like there will always be outliers, high performers who are willing to burn everything around them down. But for the majority of people, it's not fulfilling and it's not sustainable. And we, more and more, we're seeing, mental health issues popping up. We're seeing, physical health issues popping up because we just can't cope anymore. We're in such a connected world. We have so many avenues and channels, and I don't know if it's sort of a big thing in the US, but in Australia, there's been a lot of talk about the right to disconnect. the right to disconnect from work because we
don't they call it quiet quitting? Is that what they're talking? Is that the same thing?
So quiet quitting is where you go and find another job.
Oh, okay. I thought it was where you keep the same job, but you do what your responsibilities are on paper and nothing else.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe actually you're right. And like what I'm thinking of actually is the Great Resignation.
Oh, that's that's right. Not quiet quitting. The Great Resignation. That's it. I stated it. I stated it incorrectly. Yeah.
I think I might have as well. Well, it's one of the two things. But the right to disconnect is your right to be able to, at least the way that I understand it, is your right to be able to clock off from work, to not be checking email, to be able to go on holiday and not log in, and to actually the benefits of technology have been that we are more connected, that you can have more flexibility with the way that you work, the times that you work, etc. But what's happened is we've just seen more and more that work time is like flowing into personal time, especially, with COVID, how the home space and the workplace started to merge because everybody was working from home. So the right to disconnect is almost in a response to that, where it's like we need to have some boundaries put back into place because it isn't healthy, emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, for us to 100% of the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, be connected to our work. It's not healthy for any one area of your life to take over. You want to have that balance. You want to have that. And yes, there will be maybe periods of life or periods of the week where one takes over more than the other. But when you're looking at your entire day and your entire life and your entire year, and then over your entire day, your entire week, your entire sort of like life over the year, you want to be able to look back and show that there was actually that balance, that it wasn't all just about work, and that we have to start to put those boundaries in place so that people can actually feel that there is opportunity to make the relationship connections, to have the social time that's so important, that we have that downtime, that we have that disconnection from the thinking and the focus and the pressure of our work today.
You know what I got to do?
Something that has to be done.
I was fortunate in that, as a business consultant, I was doing early on, I did a lot of work international, primarily in Canada, but I hit 6 or 7 different countries that I was doing work in. And so I would be gone for a bit. And then when my son turned 4 years old, I said enough of this. I live in a city, I live in a community, a large county, Orange County, that had 20 million people. And then I said to myself, if I do, as a business consultant, if I can't find work with 20 million people, then I should change my jobs. I'm not doing a good job. And so I was able to work out where I made enough income for us to do okay with, and I worked 25 hours a week at my job because I worked out. I officed out of my home. I didn't have any boss. I was my boss, and I spent 20 hours a week with my son, coaching baseball and playing with him. 20 hours a week. Do you know what my relationship with my son is like today? And do you know what it was like all those years? As a matter of fact, we tell this funny story because I would be gone maybe a week out of the year. And my son was 5 years old, and we said, "So, Sonny," that's what I call him. "So, Sonny, what do dads do?" And he says, "Well, dads take kids to school. They swim in the lake with them. They do the laundry. I cooked at the time. They cook. And what do moms do? They work." It was just an opposite, it was the opposite construct. And it was beautiful for me. And it's not that my wife doesn't have an incredible relationship with my son. She does. But that was a marvelous time. And it was one where work took second place to relationship.
That's such a beautiful example of what's possible when you rethink what the normal paradigms are. And I was listening to the book, the audiobook of The Body Keeps the Score, which, it's a pretty heavy book. It's about how our bodies hold on to trauma. And, it's a very heavy book, so it's taken me ages. It's taken me like 2 years just to get past the book. Because I will kind of listen to it for a little bit of time, and I'll be like, oh, that was really, fantastic information, just absolutely mind-blowing. And the case studies and the stories are just absolutely, both heart-wrenching and also just so inspiring, and just the awareness of the information. But I also heard the other day that, there used to be this big focus on the role of mothers, and the bad mothers would cause kids to grow up bad, and that used to be the kind of the prevailing theory. But
and the bad mothers are the working mothers, right?
Yeah, or just bad mothers, just generally, they might not show enough love, care, and affection. But it's like absent fathers. Like, what has that done to kids as well? It's not all just about the mother or the mother role. That mother, maybe if there's a mother figure or a female figure in life, but it goes the same for fathers. And you're now getting a lot of fathers who, during COVID, they got to be home with their kids and they loved it. They loved to be able to have that connection. And then you got a lot of, mothers who are like, wow, I cannot be home with the kids all the time. Thank God I have work to be able to
I don't know.
break from being home.
You know what? We need to take a break, and then we're coming back, and I've got a couple of equally important subjects that I want to go through with you, so I can't wait to continue. But let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Mm-hmm.
Hi there, this is Charlie Hedges, and you're listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie and my very special guest from Australia, Lata Hamilton, who is a change leadership expert and confidence expert, and we are going to talk in a little bit about confidence. But before I do that, Lata, you mentioned something very interesting, that you have an intuitive business coach. And you who talks to you about the new earth and the new business paradigm from the old patriarchal model of business. And so I have two questions regarding that. One, what is an intuitive business coach? And second, and even more important, what do you and she mean by a new earth and a new business paradigm?
So my intuitive business coach is called Jacqueline Atkins, and she's based in Australia, but she has clients, all over the world, and she mostly works with female entrepreneurs, of which I am one. So I have my own business, and I guess why I call her an intuitive business coach is because what she talks a lot about is actually the energy of your business. And so you are an individual person, and then your business is its own entity. It's its own separate thing to you. Like it has stemmed from you, but it actually sits apart from you almost and has its own energy body and its own. So my business often shows up as a unicorn. So it'll be a different type of unicorn. Sometimes it'll be different colors. Sometimes it'll be more like a stallion, like really kind of like fierce and strong. Sometimes it'll be really childlike and, almost like a cartoon unicorn and stuff like that. And so I have these, and then because I have different arms of my business, where I have my consulting business that often shows up as like almost like a prince or a knight, and then I used to do coaching, so my coach was more of a goddess or a maiden or a princess, and then when I was doing podcasts with the US, it was like an eagle. And so I have these different business energy entities because I have these different arms of my business.
Are they sort of like, are they sort of like archetypes?
Yeah, they are a little bit, but they can show up as anything, like anybody, and they might show up differently when you do different sort of meditations or different activities, exercises that she'll often lead us through. And what's really fantastic about it is that it puts you in conversation with your business, and it creates a dialogue, and it creates this ability to almost have a bit of objectivity but to also not take everything so on board, so that you're not necessarily, you and your business are not interlinked in the way that you show up and the way that the business shows up is not necessarily the same thing. One of my other business coaches, Denise Duffield-Thomas, she's a money mindset mentor for women. And she kind of has a similar thing. She's like, I'm this way in my personal life, but my business, I'm messy in my personal life, but my business is super organized. They are not the same thing. And I think it flows really nicely when we talk about organizations and we talk about, career and things like that, because it's exactly the same. There's so many people out there who their life is their career, their life is their business. They do anything for their company. It is a separate entity and it's not your business. It's not even your business. When you're an employee, that is not even your business. You have to treat yourself as a business, and you are a business working with your company.
That's a brilliant idea. You're a B2B to your business.
Absolutely. So treat yourself like a business. Have those boundaries in place. Have those contracts in place. Know what you're both getting. Negotiate so you get the best deal and the best outcome for the both of you, and it's a win-win. It's not about your company. You are not subsumed by your company. And so while Jacqueline Atkins often talks about it in terms of entrepreneurship and individual businesses, because I work more with corporate clients in my consulting or with students who, I might be helping them with career and confidence in their career as they're in sort of like change leadership, it is also about kind of starting to translate that stuff into the corporate space as well. And so in terms of the new earth and new business paradigm, it's more about that feminine approach, about a balanced approach, about a holistic approach to the way that you show up in business and companies and corporate. It's about being more heart-centered and more people-led and really thinking about and tapping into your own intuition, which again is much more of a feminine quality. Everybody has intuition. It's just that often women generally, I'm not a very intuitive person, by the way. That's why I love working with somebody who is more intuitive, because I'm I love to be able to leverage her skills to be able to help myself become more intuitive. And
so you have a yang to your yin.
Exactly, and she actually talks about that a lot. She talks about this yang way of doing business, or this yang way of being in a company or in corporate, which is very action oriented, and it's very give, and you give until you bleed out. Do you know what I mean? It's like everything is active, everything is giving, everything is about money, everything is about results. And then the balance of that is this yin way, which is more about receiving. It's more about, attracting. It's more about balance. It's more about sort of a much more softer approach. And that's actually what I do in my own consulting business. I don't do a lot of marketing for my consultancy. I instead show up the way that I want to show up, with authenticity, with my ideas and my beliefs and my energy. And whoever resonates with that, this is the new earth, kind of new business paradigm and new earth approach. It's like whoever resonates with that will come and find me, and they'll come and seek me out to work with me.
And it doesn't have to be women. There are those of us men, because I'm pretty male. I can F-bomb with the best of them, and and I can be that sort of that male figure. But my dominating style, it is really a yin sort of feminine approach, intuitive and empathetic. Empathy are big for me, but I still am a GSD. I get stuff done. But I think it is certainly true for women, and I think women are going to impact the business world in a huge way. And as older women, die off or get out of leadership, positions, and men die off and get out of leadership positions, we're going to see a lot more of that feminine approach. I think it's a very, very powerful approach.
And I love that you raised that, actually, Charlie, because exactly what you mentioned, it's not about male and female. It's about masculine and feminine, and it's about and it's not about one being better than the other. It's about the balance, the dance between the two. And I'm actually very masculine woman. Like in my approach to work, in my approach to my career, in my approach to business, I'm actually much more of a masculine sort of yang energy. So it's been great, working with an intuitive business coach who brings out more of that feminine in me and shows me that I can actually take a more balanced approach to things.
How does that feel for you? Is that comfortable? Is that uncomfortable? Is it challenging? What does that feel like to you?
It's hard for me. Like I mentioned, I don't feel that I'm that intuitive myself. I definitely feel like as I've gotten older, I've become a bit more intuitive. But I really enjoy it. As I've been getting older, I don't know if we've spoken about this on the previous episode, but, I've got my own health challenges. I was diagnosed with endometriosis 2 years ago, and that really helped me understand why I had such crazy energy ups and downs and why I would get intense pain for some times of the months and things like that. And I was like, when I found that out, it was such a game changer for me to actually get that diagnosis and understand what was happening. And then what came after that was compassion. What came after that was, I'm not just lazy and I'm not crazy.
It was physiological. There were chemicals running through your body doing it.
Yeah, hormonal imbalances, and I'm like, I'm okay, and and I want to take a more relaxed approach to my business. I don't want to work 48 to 60 hours a week.
No.
I want to have more time to myself, and I want to be able to balance my hormones and have more flow in my day and in my week and in my year so that I don't burn out, that I actually wanted to have that. And it was such a, it's almost that permission and that invitation and that permission to respect my body, to respect my cycles, to respect me as being a woman. And sometimes that means that, I don't want to have to push myself through. And again, that patriarchal model of business, how our companies and corporate structures have been created is very masculine. It's an expectation that regardless of how you're feeling, you'll show up anyway, you'll push through. And so many women are so good at hiding the fact that our cycles are changing our hormones day by day, how we think, feel, our appetite, our sleep. Not to mention, if there's pregnancy or, young children or anything like that. Like, we are in a constant state of flux as women, but our businesses and our corporate structures expect you to sort of, that you don't change through the months. And that it's just like, yep, cool, regardless of the day, the week, or the month or the year, you'll be the same. And that's
at least you're calling it.
We have women.
Lata, you're calling it. So many times, you hear this discussion and it's denial. It has no effect on us. And that's untrue. You're calling it, saying it's real. Now let's work with that because we are still producers. We're still valuable to the organization. It's just that the motif is different.
Yes. And if you saw the number of women who work through pain or low energy or, you know what I mean? Like women are so good at just carrying on. Like what you said, just get stuff done. Women are so good at just doing that. And our pain thresholds are incredible. And we just show up to work each day and often we're just pushing through. And it's like, what if we didn't have to? What if we were able to transform the way that companies and the corporate world structures itself? We make up 50% of the population. We are actually making up more university qualified and graduated people.
More in the United States, there's going to be more women in Congress than men.
Absolutely. It's like we should be taking that equal level of leadership. We should be taking our equal place in leadership. We should be having the way that we would thrive in the world of work, having its equal ability to shine. And don't get me wrong, I still think we need to deliver. I still think that we need to get stuff done. Like, you can't just rock up to work and be like, I'm just going to float through my day. Like, we still want to get stuff done, and so many women have such great work ethic, but it's like, can we do it in a different way? Can we do it in a way that supports our health and our hormones instead of, puts us constantly in a state of drain and burnout? And then from the flip side, can we do it in a way where men get to also have that permission to slow down, to smell the roses, to, you know, be able to have a more balanced life for themselves too. And
to be
that's
human.
What that shift really is, to be human, for everybody to be human together.
You know what I want to do, because we are closing in on time, but I just have a very important subject I want to talk about. So let's kind of make a little transition, and it had to do with you writing me saying, I would really like to talk about the changing criteria for corporate roles, and that I don't have your exact quote, but it was about how do you, if you don't have the credentials, how do you get the kind of employment that you want if you don't have this certain amount of credentials or experience? And you know, and as I was thinking about that, it seems to me like titles like MBA, although they are very useful, I am seeing in my circles are not required as much as they have been in the recent past. And I like what you wrote. You wrote, we need to keep an abundance mentality in a challenging economy in which we learn how to stay positive, create new opportunities, and approach things in a different way. Necessity is the mother of invention. I love that. And you know, I had a question, but I want to tell you a story. Can I tell you a story of a movie I just saw?
Yes, please.
It's from a book that was very popular in, I think, 2000. I think in the decade of the 2000s. It was called Shantaram, and a TV series was just done. I don't know the platform, but Charlie Hunnam from Sons of Anarchy, which, you know, I love Charlie Hunnam. He plays a convict in Australia who escapes from prison, and he gets a false passport ID, and he goes to India, and he finds himself in the slums of Bombay, and because that's where people are not going to ask for his papers, and he does, you know, he can still live, and you know, there's exciting drama all around it. But he came from Australia as a paramedic, and when some serious things happened in the slum, the people in the slum had no access to health and formal education because of the caste system. So they had no doctors. And so he would treat them as a paramedic, and he would treat certain things that he felt he could treat. Well, before long, he became the doctor of this community of a few thousand people. And it was explained that, and you may want to look this up, it's Jugaad, Jugaad. And it's a Hindi word that means improvising or improving on what you have. He's not going to get any more resources. He's not going to become a doctor. He has to just improvise and improve on what he learns and what he has, and teach that, and not teach that, but act accordingly. And I think that is so true of us in the work world, is that it's not always going to school, taking classes, getting degrees. It's about taking what gifts you have inside and using them. And I'll close with this. I won't close the podcast. I'll close my speech, and then want to hear what you have to say. Instead of behind my name, I was an executive coach. I've been a business manager. I managed a division of 120 people when I was in my 20s. I retired as executive coach to 5 CEOs of billion-dollar companies. I have no organizational development training. I have no therapy. I have no business training. And I put the letters that I put behind my name are, instead of EDD or PhD, I put 3 acronyms: GSD, FSO, and MSU. Now, I have a nice way of saying it. The S can stand for stuff, but I prefer rougher language. So that I have 3 languages. GSD, I get shit done. FSO, I figure shit out. MSU, I make shit up. So what that means is I produce, I problem solve, and I create. Those are my credentials. That's what I'm hired for, that people know I'm going to produce, I'm going to problem solve with you, and I'm going to create new ideas. Think about all of the people you deal with, the women especially you deal with, that have their own 3-letter acronyms that they can bring to an organization that is not a PhD or an MBA or whatever, business administration. What do you think about that idea?
I absolutely love it, Charlie. It's so powerful, and I think you've hit the nail on the head because even for me, when I was starting out in my corporate career, I had just finished university and I was going into the corporate world. So I said to my dad, I'm like, should I go and get an MBA? And he said to me, he's like, Lata, one of the benefits of getting an MBA is the networking that you do with the people that are there. So it's sometimes better to wait, do the MBA to learn those, topics and skills, but also be at a more senior level to network more easily with the people who would be in the MBA. So I never did one. And I'm so glad that I didn't waste my time, money, and energy doing it, because exactly like you, Charlie, I figure out my own approach to things. I create this melting pot of everything that I've ever learned, done, created, ideas, new approaches, and I merge it all into what I call change leadership. And I have my vibrant change model, which is a model that I created to just understand how to deliver great change.
And that's in my language, that's MSU. You make stuff up. That's creating. We just make it up it just comes out of our brain. You just make it up and it becomes a thing.
Yeah.
You create.
It's not made up from nowhere. It's
Absolutely.
made up from the years of experience or the observations or the universal downloads that you might be getting, those insights and aha moments, or that intuition that you have. It's not that it comes from nowhere.
Exactly.
But exactly what you said, vibrant change, I created that because I was like, I want to create something that really resonates with the way that I lead change. And I just ran a workshop last week and people were like, I love that. Vibrant change is so powerful. And so it's creating something brand new based on your unique gifts, skills, experience, and life. And I say that to my students all the time. They'll go, if they want to go and do a change management accreditation, I don't even tell people about the accreditation that I did because it was so not worth it. It was kind of very theoretic, very methodology based, very it wasn't practical. You couldn't take the stuff and apply it the next day to get results. And I'm a very practical, I believe in practical application and being able to actually really use things, instantly to get real traction and get results. And so the way that I teach change is that real practical application. And so people will come and do my program and I'm like, when you do Leading Successful Change, which is my course, it's I teach you the basic tools, templates, and techniques, but the way that you use those, the energy that you show up with, your unique skills, abilities, and qualities, and the way that you lead change is where the magic happens. I'll give you the basic stuff, but you're the one that makes the magic happen. And you can, and I say to them, I'm like, make it fit for purpose for you. There is no right or wrong. Adapt, be flexible with things. And I instead focus on building their confidence of how to show up as a leader and how to decide and choose what's going to be the most appropriate thing to do in that moment. Because I'm like, you need to be flexible in today's day and age. We cannot be taking our traditional cookie cutter approach to change and to change management. But we can't be doing that, as you're saying in your work, you can't be doing that at all in business anymore, in corporate anymore. You have to be flexible and agile, fit for purpose, practical.
That is perfect. That's exactly the way we need to close the show. I love that statement. I have an off-the-wall question for you. What city are you in?
Sydney, Australia.
Oh, you're Sydney. We're coming to Sydney next year. I'll make sure I look you up and we can come and say hi.
Oh, I would love that. That would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, we're going to spend some time there. Lata Hamilton, you are amazing. I love your creativity. I love your drive, your passion, your care, I can see why people want to work with you. Way to go.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a really fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, I also want to thank our listeners for tuning in to the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.